The letter arrived on thick, expensive parchment paper, the kind that felt like a lawsuit. Leo and Sarah Miller found it tucked into their brass mail slot, a stark white flag of surrender against their warm, oak door. "What is it now?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. She was still in her gardening clothes. Hands smudged with soil from the rose bushes she'd been tending the very same roses the HOA had deemed non-compliant with the approved color palette. Leo didn't answer. He just slid his thumb under the flap and pulled out the single, damning page. His eyes scanned the legalese, his jaw tightening with each word. When he finished, he let out a long, slow breath. The sound of a man trying to keep his temper in check. "They fined us $500, he said, his voice dangerously calm, "for the egregious and unsanctioned installation of a non-conforming garden gnome." Sarah stared at him, then let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Frodo? They're fining us for Frodo." Frodo was a 6-inch tall, chipped ceramic gnome their 7-year-old daughter, Chloe, had painted at a birthday party. He was a garish, lumpy little thing with one eye bigger than the other, and he held a place of honor next to Sarah's prize-winning roses. To Chloe, he was the guardian of the garden. They cite bylaw 14C, Leo read, "All exterior decorations, including but not limited to lawn ornaments, must be submitted to the Architectural Review Committee for pre-approval. Failure to remove it within 48 hours results in an additional $100 per day fine." He crumpled the letter in his fist. "This is it, Sarah. This is the last straw. The flagpole, the paint color, the unauthorized welcome mat, and now a child's art project. They've declared war on a kindergartner." Sarah's maternal fury ignited, mixing with the simmering resentment of years of petty tyranny. "Okay," she said, her voice cold and steady. "Then we fight back." The fight began not with a shout, but with a whisper. That night, Leo and Sarah didn't just seethe in private. They invited Mark and Elena from 2 doors down, who were facing a $1,000 fine for a visibly parked work van. They called Brenda from the cul-de-sac, who had been threatened with a lien for building a small, accessible ramp for her aging mother. Their living room became a war council. Mark, a contractor with a tablet full of building codes, was the muscle. Elena, a paralegal, was the strategist. Brenda, a retired librarian, was the researcher. And Leo, a systems analyst, was the architect of their counterattack. "The problem is the rules," Elena said, sipping her wine. "It's the selective and punitive enforcement. Did you know the whole president, Mr. Harrington, has a fountain that violates 3 separate bylaws regarding water usage and noise? But it was grandfathered in." "We need to document everything," Leo said, pulling up a shared cloud drive on his laptop. "Every bylaw, every fine, every interaction. We'll create a timeline of their harassment." Brenda, her glasses perched on her nose, was already deep in the dense, 80-page HOA covenants. "Conditions and restrictions CC and RS. Look here," she said, tapping a paragraph. "Article 9, Section 2. All fines must be directly related to the cost of enforcement or damages incurred by the association. A $500 fine for a gnome. We can argue that's punitive and unenforceable." A plan began to form. They would fight fire with the letter of the law. For 2 weeks, the Cul-de-sac Alliance, as they jokingly named themselves, played the perfect, compliant homeowners. They paid their fines under written protest, citing the relevant CC and R clauses. They submitted, in triplicate, requests for approval for the most mundane things: a new mailbox, a park bench, a request to paint their front door the exact same shade of white it already was. They flooded the HOA's volunteer board with paperwork, forcing them to adhere to their own bureaucratic nightmare. The retaliation was swift and petty. Leo found a formal warning on his windshield for having a slightly underinflated tire, visible from the street. Sarah was cited for the unruly height of her grass. It was a 1/4 inch over regulation. The tension was a live wire. Then came the first shocking twist. It was a Tuesday evening. Leo was working late. Sarah was putting Chloe to bed when she heard the crunch of gravel and the roar of an engine. She peered out the window to see a sleek, black SUV Harrington's car speed past their house. A second later, there was a sickening thud crunch. Her heart leaped into her throat. Chloe's bike, the little pink bicycle with tassels on the handles, was chained to the lamppost at the edge of their property. It was now a twisted knot of metal, flattened beneath the front tire of Harrington's SUV. Harrington got out, his face flushed with anger, not at the accident, but at the inconvenience. He kicked the mangled bike. "This is a violation. Obstruction of a public walkway," he shouted to the quiet street. Sarah was out the door in seconds, phone in hand, recording. "You just destroyed my daughter's bicycle. It shouldn't have been there," he spat back. We'll be adding the cost of my detailing to your next fine. This paint is scratched. That's when the second twist arrived. A patrol car, silent until now, pulled up to the curb. An officer got out, his face stern. We received a call about a disturbance and possible property damage, the officer said, his eyes taking in the scene, the furious woman, the entitled man, the destroyed child's bike. Harrington immediately tried to take control. Officer, excellent timing. These homeowners are in constant violation of our community standards. This obstruction caused damage to my vehicle. The officer listened, then turned to Sarah. Mom, is that your child's bike? Yes, officer. It was legally parked on our property, chained to a fixed object. He swerved onto the curb and destroyed it. She held up her phone. I have it all on video. The officer's demeanor shifted. He reviewed the video. He saw the reckless speed, the intentional swerve, the kick. He turned back to Harrington. Sir, that's criminal damage to property. And based on this video, I'd say it's intentional. I'm going to have to cite you. The look on Harrington's face, the sheer, impotent shock, was a victory sweeter than any they had imagined. But it was only the beginning. The citation was a crack in the HOA's armor, and the lions poured through it. They now had documented evidence of the board's vindictive and reckless behavior. They moved to the final phase of their plan, the homeowners' meeting. They packed the community clubhouse. Harrington and his board sat at the front table, looking beleaguered. Leo, Sarah, Mark, Elena, and Brenda stood together. The floor is now open for homeowner comments, Harrington said, his voice weary. Leo stood up. He didn't shout. He was calm, precise, and devastating. Mr. Harrington, members of the board, we are here tonight to discuss your gross misuse of power and your violation of your own fiduciary duties. He clicked a button, and a projector lit up the screen. Over the past 3 months, Leo continued, this board has issued over $8,000 in fines to just 5 households. Using Article 9, Section 2 of our CC&RS, we have calculated that the actual cost of enforcement for these minor infractions amounts to, at most, $500 in administrative costs. The remaining $7,500 constitutes punitive fines, which are explicitly forbidden. Elena stood next. Furthermore, we have documented 17 separate instances of selective enforcement. For example, Bylaw 7A prohibits structures over 6 feet in height without a permit. Yet, you, Mr. Harrington, have an 8-foot-tall trellis. Your justification of grandfathered in is false, as the satellite imagery from the county assessor's office shows it was built just last year. Slide after slide appeared. Evidence of procedural errors, violations of open meeting laws, the video of Harrington destroying the bike, which drew a collective gasp from the room. Then, Brenda delivered the coup de grace. As per the Davis-Sterling Act in this state, she said, her voice clear and loud, homeowners have the right to recall any member of the whole board for breach of fiduciary duty. We have here, signed by over 60% of the homeowners in this community, a petition for your immediate removal. She walked to the front table and placed the thick stack of papers in front of Harrington. The room was utterly silent. You can't do this, Harrington whispered, his face ashen. The law says we can, Leo said. You weaponized these rules against us. You forgot that they apply to you, too. You are hereby removed from your position, effective immediately. A new election will be held, and until then, an interim board comprised of members who believe a community should be a home, not a prison, will assume control. A month later, the change was palpable. The new board, with Leo as the temporary president and Elena as the treasurer, had their first meeting. Their first act was to dismiss all the petty, punitive fines. Their second was to approve a new, simplified set of guidelines focused on safety and property value, not aesthetic tyranny. On a sunny Saturday morning, Leo was grilling in his backyard. Sarah was planting new flowers, a vibrant, unapproved mix of purples and oranges, and standing proudly beside the newly blooming rose bushes. His lopsided gaze watching over the garden was Frodo the gnome, back in his rightful place. Mark walked over from next door, holding 2 cold beers. He handed one to Leo. To the fall of the empire, Mark said, clinking his bottle against Leo's. Leo smiled, looking at his daughter chasing fireflies on the lawn, at his wife happily digging in the dirt, at the unspoiled sunset over the roofs of their homes. No, Leo said softly, to the defense of the realm. They had used the HOA's own weapons, the laws, the bylaws, the paperwork, and turned them into shields. They hadn't just won a battle, they had reclaimed their sanctuary, and in the quiet, forgiving twilight, their neighborhood finally felt like a home again.